Hot take, everyone. Severance is a really good show, but I would take it further. I think Severance is currently the best show on TV, next to probably The White Lotus. But in terms of a continuous story, season to season show, Severance is crushing it. I haven't been this kind of proud of a show, so to speak, since maybe Succession. And I think the highs of this might be better. I think maybe Succession was overall a more solid, consistent show, but my God, the finales of season 1 and season 2 of Severance are genuinely next level television. So today I want to talk about all my deep character insights, my analysis of interpersonal relationships between the innies and the outies, and all this interesting stuff going on in Severance. Now, before I get into a complete spoiler talk going episode by episode and character by character, just a spoiler-free recommendation. I actually think you should watch this show knowing as little as possible. Like, genuinely just going blind. If you want a good science fiction show with incredible character dynamics, go watch Severance. It's beautifully shot. The music is incredible, by the way. Performances are top notch. If you need a little more convincing, the show is about basically this procedure that people can get done where basically at work they are a different person. So during their personal life they have a set of memories and a world that is theirs, and then when they go to work they go in an elevator and they become like a different consciousness takes over. So it's that idea of like, oh my God, I wish I could just skip work, basically kind of done literally, so it's a very good idea. And even though at first it sounds like a really great idea, you're like, fuck yeah, sign me up, the show very quickly explores the dark undercurrent and the dark philosophical questions that this procedure sets up. That's all I'm going to give you. Go watch the show. It's the best show on TV. You don't want to miss out. Now, let's get into a spoiler talk about season 2. Season 2, at its best, takes the concepts presented in season 1 and just stretches them out in such an exciting, fantastic way. Now, I do have a few notes and I'll get to that later before I go character by character, but I think what this season does really well is when it's hitting its stride, it's taking those initial interesting concepts and questions you might have about Severance and building upon them.
Hey guys, I'm just editing. For some reason throughout this video, I accidentally refer to Gretchen as Gemma. So Dylan's partner, Gretchen, I accidentally call Gemma. I flash it on the screen, but just letting you know, sorry about that.
Some of the most interesting stuff here is, say, Dylan's innie, right? Dylan's below person falling in love for Outie Dylan's Gemma, right? Just such an interesting idea. And again, such a fantastic way to explore these characters. You also get to know Dylan's Outie, and it's super interesting to see the stark contrast between innie Dylan and Outie Dylan. And I think the most interesting part here is, and this goes for pretty much all the innies and the outies, is you can actually see that the same person is kind of there. They are very different, but I think it's a product of their life experience. And what is most interesting is, yes, on one end, the idea of severance is this idea that you relieve yourself of the burden of work, So let's talk about Dylan and his innie and his outie. That's a good example of that. So when you look at Dylan's outie, Gemma seems kind of disenfranchised with him. She doesn't seem super into him because the life has essentially been drained from him. He doesn't have this lust for life, this lust for his family that he used to have. And what's interesting is people want to go like, oh, that's because, work and life has beat him down. But then his innie, all the innie knows is work, yet the innie is happier. And that's the most interesting thing that is explored this season, is you really get a sense that even though the innie's existences, right, this idea that they are corporate slaves and all they know is work, is dystopian and awful, there's also a sense of happiness and fulfillment they have in their life. Like, if I went to a job and they expected me to be really proud that I organized numbers in a bucket, I'd be like, you're taking the fucking piss. But there's something to be said about the fact that these innies, it's all they know, and it actually brings them a sense of joy. And also their personal relationships actually become really kind of important to them, even though they're much sparser and few and far between and less evolved than their outies, they're just as valid. And I think that's the big thing that's explored in Severance season 2. It's this idea that innies are as important, as much full people as their outies. And I've seen some dog shit takes online. Like, the only way the ending really works is if you consider the innies people. Otherwise, yeah, I get people being annoyed at innie Mark's choice, but in my opinion, you are kind of entirely missing the point of the show if you're actually annoyed at innie Mark. If you think these innies are just naive and don't deserve to fight for what they have, and it's not a real existence, not a real consciousness, I feel like you're kind of having the worldview of Lumen itself, and it's really unfortunate. And I think that's what season two delivers on so well, is just this idea that you start to get a sense of community and friendship and importance with one another amongst the innies. So episode 4, for example, I love the sense of betrayal that Irving has, slowly realizing that the Hallie downstairs they have is actually Helena from upstairs. It really, really upsets him and bothers him. And it's because he knows these people to his core. It feels like such a sense of betrayal. Like they haven't been through what we've been through. This is our space. This is our world. This is all we have. And someone from the outside has had the audacity to like sneak their way in. So anyways, just those are some general thoughts just to show that I will be breaking down the characters and the episode. So let's go episode by episode. So episode 1, hear me out on this, didn't blow me away as much as I'd hoped. We're obviously coming off the back of season 1's incredible ending. And season 2 opens with an episode that to me felt slightly a bit too much kind of more of the same. Like the way season 1 ended, you're like, nothing's going to be the same. That is huge. What a, when they're escaping their severed floor and going in the outside world, it feels like the whole sky is collapsing. You're like, what's going on? And obviously Mark screaming out that Gemma is alive. And then season 2 opens with that incredible running shot. And important to note, it's Innie Mark trying to do the right thing and find Gemma. And you need to also remember that Innie Mark did the right thing trying to scream out that Gemma was alive. So we open season 2, he's running around, super exciting. Like, what's going to happen? There's a serious time pressure to the fact that he's running around. And then all of a sudden, once he stops running, the first episode to me kind of grinded to a bit of a halt. We are presented with a new cast of characters. Do any of us even remember their names? Like you're welcome to disagree in the comments, but as much as I enjoyed watching Mark kind of fuck with these new cast of characters, these new innies that he works with, I just found it a little, given how the end of season 1 ended, a little kind of time wasty. And this might be intentional. It might be intentional that we feel this way, given the fact that we're all wanting answers and like what happened. And then the show intentionally kind of like puts us in this like stagnant place. But truthfully, I didn't love episode 1 as much as I'd hoped. I thought it was just a totally fine episode of Severance. I will say I liked the approach that episode 1 was entirely kind of on the severed floor, if I remember correctly, entirely innie based. And episode 2 was entirely outie based. But episode 1 kind of ends at the point where I feel like it should have started, which is just the innies reuniting and telling each other about what they saw outside. They set up the idea that Hallie might not be who she seems because she gives like a weird memory, and we can take it one of two ways. Maybe she's just disguising this because she doesn't want them to know she's an Egan, or maybe she is an Egan. I kind of clocked that she was the Egan, like she was Helena down below, but regardless, episode 2 picks up and it's focused purely on the outies and explores Mark, trying to make sense of who's alive on the outside. Really interesting stuff. Again, kind of a slow start, but we get to episode 3. And that's where this show gets its source back. And truthfully, I feel like episode 3 onwards, we get to the heights of the end of season 1 incredibly early. I feel like season 1 was this slow build in quality till you got to the end of season 1 where you're like, holy fuck, best show on TV. Ugh. Whereas season 2 takes 2 episodes and then all of a sudden you're right into it. The exploration in episode 3, they bring back that chick. I forget her name. I think it's Rugby. I'm so sorry. I forget her name, but they bring her back and she does feel, especially the way she's treated in season 2, like a kind of plot job, like a plot device. She's just there to deliver exposition and kind of get the plot moving. But regardless, she does fucking get the plot moving because she gets back and she starts getting Mark to attempt to reintegrate, and we will talk about reintegration throughout the season because I have a lot of thoughts on this whole reintegration idea. But the way episode 3 ends, I was like, best show on TV. Another show would have stretched this out for 6 seasons, but here we are 3 episodes into season 2 and we're doing game breaking, plot changing stuff. And then similar to everyone, I assume we all had this experience where we slowly realize that the show kind of suggests to us that reintegration is happening, only to not really do it. We do get a sense that some memories are leaking in, but the way episode 3 ended, I got the vibe that they were probably going to be reintegrated, and it was this insane, trippy experience. But regardless, they pull back on that, and given the way the season ends, I actually don't hate it, but while I was watching it, I was a bit confused. Yeah, I just found the way they presented this reintegration plot kind of strange and confusing. Again, that might be intentional. We might meant to be feeling like Mark, but I feel like Mark doesn't seem too frustrated with the process overall, despite being given the impression that reintegration is actually happening. Regardless, episode 4 is so fucking good. Episode 4 is incredible. It's set in the snow. It's that one, Woe's Hollow, is that what it's called? But yeah, they have this whole kind of retreat. And one thing I will say is I love that Milchek seems genuinely passionate about them having a good time. Now, it is a good time on his terms. It's what he perceives to be a good time. But there's this interesting thing with Milchek that they do this season where he's obviously an antagonistic force, obviously a villain, but you get a sense that he does care about the innies having a good time. He really enjoys all this corporate lumen nonsense and wants them to enjoy it at the same level, and just doesn't clock the fact that of course they're not going to enjoy it at that level. But I love the visuals this episode. I love how it's presented. I love Irving's dream sequences, but really the kind of standout stuff in this episode is Irving cluing on to the fact that Hallie downstairs is Hallie from upstairs. It's not Hallie, it's Helena. And I thought this was just so interesting. I love that it was Irving that figured it out, and Mark says a lot of interesting things about Mark. I love that Mark and Helena from above have sex. This clues into this really interesting thing that we're doing with Helena from above, where I feel like Helena from above actually envies Hallie from down below. Initially, I thought she was up to something nefarious and trying to fuck up the innies, but I genuinely think because her kind of outie existence is so shit and her family is weird as fuck and she almost feels like she's being groomed by her family. It's really fucking weird. I feel like she longs for connection that Hallie down below has. I feel like she's envious and the kiss is what brought her down, and I think she actually wanted to like sleep with Mark. I don't think it was like a nefarious plan of like I'm gonna like I don't know what, but you get what I mean. I initially I thought this was so nefarious and evil, but given the way the season goes, especially that interaction Hallie has with Mark, I felt like this was just kind of an earnest, obviously on false ground. It's technically sexual assault, but it felt like this desperate attempt for her to feel human connection. Also, super interesting. We do get little splices that the integration is having a bit of an effect. Mark has visions of Gemma when he's about to sleep with Hallie, but yeah, or Helena, sorry, but super interesting stuff. But Irving crashing out, Irving realizing that it's Hallie from up above, Helena from up above, and drowning her. My favorite shot of the season, by the way, is the kind of like innie outie transition that they do, or outie innie transition that they do, but while she's drowning. Just an incredible shot. People have gone on about the incredible cinematography this season, you know, with the running scene and a lot of the transitions in episode 7. And as much as I love those, occasionally those felt like kind of style over substance a bit. Like they were obviously very impressive, but the ones that stood out to me were that, yeah, that that water shot where it switches from Helena to Hallie. I just thought it was incredible and a great story moment. And basically everything they did in the season 2 finale, episode 10, was just remarkable. But yeah, I love that it was Irving, and I love that Irving's innie being turned off feels like a fucking like horrific murder. Like they actually frame it that way and it's really effective. That's the last we see of Innie Irving. Also, I forgot to mention, I love in the first episode, I think it is the first episode, that claymation animation they do. Like genuinely excellent stuff and my favorite part of those first 2 episodes. So moving on, the back end of the season, we get this very interesting exploration between Gemma and Dylan's Innie. This is peak Severance. This is what I come to Severance for. I love these existential questions about what the innies like and what the outies like. I love that, yeah, they do both show who they were. I love that Gemma is like, yeah, this innie version of you reminds me of who you used to be. And it shows that like basically they could be the same people. It just depends on what life experience they have. Super interesting stuff. I love that she starts having an emotional affair with Innie Dylan. It doesn't feel cheap or forced or rushed, and I think every scene between them was perfect. It simultaneously felt like someone who was kind of familiar with Gemma vaguely, but has also never experienced talking with someone they could have romantic potential with. It was pitch perfect. My only disappointment is that in episode 9, I think it is, the way it wraps up was a bit rushed for me. It's not that I hate the idea of Dylan proposing to Gemma. I actually really like it. And I think if they just gave us a little more time with him making the ring and him talking to Hallie or someone else about it, and they're kind of brushing him off and he takes it really seriously and he believes it's going to happen and they're all calling him crazy just for that ending, it would have ripped my heart out. It just felt slightly early. And on one hand, I don't mind the fact that for him, it's early, like timeline wise. Obviously, he's only known her for 3 hours or something, but to him, it's like this world defining experience. So I don't mind that. That's not my issue. I just wish we got a little more time with him, saw the effect it had, so we kind of really were rooting for her to say yes, and or felt bad for him the whole time, being like, dude, it's not going to happen. Because as it stands, when it happened, it felt slightly rushed. Regardless, moving on, that was kind of the highlight of those, I'm not going to call them filler episodes, but the highlight of those back end episodes. We get to episode 7. This is easily a highlight for most people, most fans of Severance, and it is remarkable. I love the way that the flashbacks are presented on film. I love the information we get about Gemma. I will say I much more preferred the flashbacks we got between the Audi Mark before being severed and Gemma. I just found that stuff really, really interesting, really well done. And even though we don't know Gemma well as a character, it feels like simultaneously we do know her really well. I feel like this is how, the way we feel is how any Mark feels knowing about who Gemma actually is how we feel. It's like this is technically the first time we're really properly seeing Gemma, but it feels like we've known her in our soul for ages. It's really effective writing. The transitions are very impressive, and I love the closing section. But I think what we find out in this episode is that Audi Mark can be a bit of an asshole. Prior to, I genuinely thought Mark was having a normal response to trauma, to the loss of his wife. But in here, we kind of see that like he can be a bit of a brat. Now, I'm not mad at him, and I don't think it was that bad that he didn't go with her to that party or whatever it was. Like, yes, it's obviously very unfortunate that Gemma died on the way home, but it seemed like to me that he had stuff to do. It seemed like he had work to do. He could have been a little warmer about it, but he was saying, hey, look, I need to do this. I'm sorry. And it's always awkward when you have to say to someone, like, I know you want to hang out, but I'm just a little too busy. So that I wasn't too mad at him about. The part where I thought Audi Mark was exposed as a bit of a bumhole was when he was kind of giving her shit about either doing the IVF, I think it was, or doing the card stuff. And he kind of ruined it for her and kind of then told her off for being dramatic. It just felt really cruel. And we see this shade of Mark throughout the season here and there. And again, I know he's grieving, but this was prior to the grieving. So I think it's an important thing to note because it backs up how I feel about the ending a bit with Innie Mark and Outie Mark's respective decisions. So moving forward, we have episode 8. Now, episode 8 is considered the worst episode of Severance. It's considered easily the worst episode of the season. How do I put this? I personally maybe would have preferred that these flashbacks were scattered around the season, given sort of the pacing of this episode. But I like what they were going for. Like, I really like the idea of, I first off would not call it a filler episode at all. Right? I thought it was an interesting exploration of this world, but truthfully, I personally don't find the way this show is leaned into very heavy sci-fi dystopian stuff super interesting. I'll get into that later. But I did personally feel like, okay, we're stretching something a bit thin. I feel like they actually could have done more with the episode. The big reveal here is that Cobell invented the severance procedure. And while I found this a bit interesting, it didn't feel particularly worth my time. I did like all the world building, and I like the idea that Lumen uses people and spits them out into what feels like this snowy wasteland. That's a really interesting idea. But in terms of the sort of cultishness of Lumen, I have to say I don't love it, and that's the part I was disappointed with the episode. I don't mind that Miss Cobell invented Severance, and I don't mind the idea that like all these people after working for Lumen are just kind of tossed aside. But when it turns into this stuff about like kind of forced impregnancy theories and kind of this like generational kind of grooming of Lumen employees and the idea that everything is Lumen and these schools kind of like separate Lumen people, like, you know, Miss Cobell's whole upbringing, I find it takes away from the initial hook that I had with this show. What I found interesting about the show was the philosophical questions it answers. I found it really eerie, this idea that is Mark here by chance, or was it Was he always kind of meant to be here? Like, is the fact that Gemma's here a coincidence, or did they choose this? The idea, like, I found all these very interpersonal, existential ideas really interesting. You know, would you get severed? How would you feel? Would you want to meet your severed self? All of that stuff is super, super interesting. You know, what it means to form a relationship, all of that stuff, I think, is the show operating at a perfect level. But what I also liked was the fact that to the innies, Lumen and the company they work for felt like their whole world. They saw it. They saw these Lumen executives as gods. When they're given a book like that shitty one, that self-help book given by Devon's partner, the UUR or whatever it's called, they think it's like a groundbreaking biblical text. And I always thought there was some really dark, tragic humor. Even the story in episode 4 that Milchek told about the kind of like going into the woods and being turned into a tree or whatever it was, all of this stuff, there was a great sense of humor for the fact that they're really mundane stories, but the innies see them as gods and like these incredible figures. But also there was a sense of tragedy that they looked to these people and saw them as gods when they're just kind of these boring Apple-like CEOs. And I think the revelation here that actually, no, they are gods. They are these like insane level cult leaders, and they are trying to do this insane stuff like put people's consciousnesses into babies and bring on, like, I've seen theories about the fact that they're trying to get Hallie pregnant to bring on the next coming of Kier. But even all that stuff removed, all these crazy theories removed, just the idea that they have their hand in everything, I think is a little less interesting, because I thought the most interesting stuff was if the innies have value in this really small world, imagine what it would be like to see the real world. But the idea that the real world is actually this cripplingly depressive, dystopian, like kind of environment where these people, these CEOs are like manipulating everyone's moves, it makes the initial hook of Severance slightly less interesting. So I hope they don't lean into this too much. To me, what interested me about Severance is clocking out of work because you don't enjoy work really worth missing all the little texts from your partner, missing all the little beautiful moments you still have in work? Even if you have a shitty 8-hour shift, is it worth missing being you? Is that worth it? You know, and simultaneously, is it worth creating a poor separate consciousness that doesn't really have their own autonomy? And I feel like that question's more interesting when the real world is actually good and the innies don't know what they're missing out on. One of the most interesting parts of the show is the fact that the innies don't know what they're missing, so it doesn't hurt them. But if they saw the real world, like, they would be completely flawed. But the idea that on the outside, the world is actually shitty and like controlled and puppeteered by Lumen, it's kind of like, well, the world is less interesting then. You know, like if I was an innie, I'd be imagining like, oh, what's it like to go for a jog? What's it like, you know, like what's it like to go to the cinema? What's it like to do all these things I love doing? But yeah, if the outside world is actually this shitty kind of like cult defined experience, it makes the kind of initial science fiction concept to me slightly less grounded, slightly less interesting. I feel all this culty stuff with Lumen is where the show loses me slightly. So all that out of the way, that was kind of my issue with episode 8. It wasn't that it was boring or that it was separate to the initial thrust of the show. It's just the more the show leans into this culty kind of insane stuff, the less interested I kind of get personally. I think it just, sometimes not everything needs to be explained. I really liked when Severance felt like the substance, where it's like there are these interesting science fiction concepts that are explained enough to understand, you know, explained enough that something does feel ominous. But, you know, I feel like the substance itself would have been a lesser movie if they gave some insane backstory that's this secret society of people that wants everyone to look super younger. Like, given what that movie was going for, I found the relationship between Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley's version of the same consciousness much more interesting. But that's me. Again, it depends on the answers we get. Depending where they take the explanation of Lumen and its intentions and what they're going for, I'm happy to walk this criticism back. But that's my big thing with season 2. I just prefer the interpersonal stuff over this kind of like Blade Runner stuff they seem to be getting at by the end of the season. But that's just me. And again, given where the finale goes, I actually had to walk it back a bit because I was really concerned. But then the finale is so character based that I kind of forgave it. So moving on, episode 9. I've seen a lot of people complain about episode 9, and I fundamentally disagree. I thought episode 9 was a fucking banger. I forgot to mention one of my favorite parts in those episodes between episode 3 and episode 7 is the moment where Irving meets up with Christopher Walken and his partner. Is it Bert and his partner? He meets up with Bert and his partner, and the discussions they have. This is what Severance is about, my friend. Like, I fucking love it. These conversations they're having where they're religious and they're like, oh, well, I wanted to go to heaven. I want to go to heaven with Bert, but Bert's done some shitty things. Interesting, by the way. Bert's done some shitty things, so I wanted an innie Bert to exist so I could be with him. But while he was existing, he fell in love with you, and the partner's getting really, really jealous. It's uncomfortable and sticky territory and really fascinating. And it's also like, yo, if you met your innie in heaven, if you met Bert's innie in heaven, he wouldn't be like the Bert you love. He's a different person. And that's what this season is really, really exploring. Just super interesting stuff. So episode 9, I fucking rated. I really liked it. I liked Mark meeting with Miss Cobell. I liked the sass he was doing. I initially said that the kind of plot with Dylan was a bit rushed, but I like him being devastated that it didn't go well for him. I loved Irving and Bert saying their final goodbye. They seemingly had a connection that carried over from the innies to the outies. I thought it was really interesting stuff. I really liked the episode. I fucking really liked the episode. I don't know why people didn't like it. I thought it was great. And yes, they didn't move the reintegration stuff super forward, but it was really interesting to hear the pieces they were setting up for Mark's plan for reintegrating, which brings us to episode 10. Hey guys, if you're enjoying this video, just while I've got you, please consider gaining a membership to this channel. I'm covering every single episode of White Lotus Season 3 as it comes out. I also do a podcast every month or every 2 weeks, depending how busy I am, talk about everything I've watched in a given month. So if you enjoy my thoughts, it's a great way to get more of them. It's basically the cost of a cup of coffee once a month. Thank you so much for watching, and back to the video. This might be one of the best episodes of TV I've ever seen. Like, God is my witness, it might actually just be the best. From the jump, first off, hour 20 minutes, we basically get a Severance movie. This shit rocks. Oh my God, this is so good. The opening chunk where you have the innie meeting the outie of Mark, the way they communicate that through the video camera is just so well done, and the editing slowly picks up until it's like an actual conversation. The way the set, all of it. But just on a character level, the outie meeting, okay, so first off, the innie meeting the outie and genuinely showing a sense of awe and like, oh my God, that's my fucking guy. But when the outie meets the innie, it's almost this like, oh, neat, cute. Instantly you're like, uh-oh. And as it goes on, you know, the plot that Mark kind of wants innie Mark to help him get Gemma out, and he says they'll reintegrate, all this stuff, you slowly realize it's not going to go perfectly. But I love the way the conversation unfolds. It feels so natural. Innie Mark makes really good points. Now I need to speculate and give some theories. The vibe I got from reintegration is I do think Outie Mark, is bullshitting. What has been presented to Outie Mark is the idea that he will gain the memories of Innie Mark so he can help bring down Lumen. He'll understand how Lumen works, but it was never presented as both consciousnesses will be in the driver's seat. You know, so I always had the vibe from reintegration that it wasn't going to be Innie Mark and Outie Mark working together. I got that vibe from Petey. I always understood it as essentially the Outie Mark, the dominant existence, just kind of gets some new memories. It's as if you've ever seen that Black Mirror episode where people have the kind of eye implants that record everything, I just took it as simply like Mark is basically opening some files on his laptop and going, oh, okay, that's that, from the POV of Innie Mark. So when Outie Mark's like, yeah, we're both going to exist, I'm like, that sounds like bullshit to me. And even on a logistical level, Innie Mark points out the fact that, like, even if what you're saying is true, it's pretty much mostly going to be you because you've existed for ages. So yeah, that's my thought. I don't know if they can do this procedure, but I always thought the way reintegration was going to work, and I thought what the idea they were going to give or present as an actual solution, rather than what Mark was saying about reintegration, was I'm going to reintegrate, I'm going to gain your memories, you'll gain some of mine as well. But the bigger thing, what will happen is, you know, maybe once a week, I'm going to sever at this birthing cabin, and then you can hang out with Hallie, or you can have your existence back. And then I thought what was going to happen there was Innie Mark was going to be like, yeah, but you're not going to stick to your word on that. You're going to completely forget about me, which Innie Mark gets at anyway. But yeah, to me, I thought the more compelling offer to Innie Mark would have been like, I'll go to these birthing cabins, or we're going to figure out a way so we can sever off the severed floor and you can be you and hang out with these people or something. You know, I thought it was going to go down that lane because, yeah, the reintegration offer sucks ass for Innie Mark. Like, yeah, he's not going to exist. And I'm glad he called him out. I love Outie Mark being like, he's like a fucking child. It's like, yeah, bro, he is. But also, he's onto it. Like, he's right. moving forward, the way Audi Mark basically goes like, oh, the relationship you have with Hallie, mine's like that times like 10,000. You can't even imagine. Condescending, shitty of Audi Mark. He should have known better. This leans into Audi Mark and be a bit of an asshole. But also, hear me out on this one, because this is a thought I've had since the ending, is I sort of think like, it's really rich of Audi Mark to say, given the fact he got a chance with Gemma. While he had Gemma, he was being a bit of a fucking prick at points. Whereas any Mark, given the fact that he's not bogged down by like these societal pressures, like the world hasn't kicked the optimism out of him, he treats Hallie incredibly well. He fucking loves her with this like childlike, innocent love, this like unadulterated, pure love. Like his things are simple. He's like, I wish we had more time. When he's talking to Hallie later in the episode, I just wish we had more time. I want to be with you, he says with tears in his eyes. Out of the two of them, I think any Mark is a bit more romantic. I think he's got this stuff on lock, which is why when people are like, oh, he doesn't deserve it, I can't believe he didn't help Gemma, or I can't believe he didn't run off with Gemma and betrayed Audi Mark like that, I'm like, you guys are missing the forest for the trees. This whole show, this whole season has been about the fact that the innies are actual people. So let's speed along through the episode. We get this incredible sequence with Milchek, and this like incredible dance sequence he does with this marching band. And I've always loved about the show, there is some weird sense of humor I have with the fact that like they're these scary corporate company that is always watching. But then they just, especially Milchek, he's like very strict and like, you must follow the rules. But then he'll just get so caught up with having a boogie that people can like overthrow him. Like he's having such a good time and he assumes they're having a good time too. They doesn't even think that they would, run away at this point. So they start running away. It's like, oh, God damn it, I was enjoying my dance. It's like, dude, this is at the point where the company was genuinely concerned that an uprising was going to happen. They needed him to do the Cold Harbor file. It's hilarious. But I love before that they finish the Cold Harbor file, they have this touching moment. Hallie says, this is the right thing to do, which is interesting given the ending. She actually pushes him to finish the Cold Harbor file and even says like, yo, I'm not going to exist. Like Helena on the outside is not going to let me exist. And what's interesting here is, initially, the read we would have got from this is because Helena doesn't like the innies, doesn't respect the innies, and has something nefarious planned and has nefarious intentions. But the read I got more so is Helena from up above would much rather experience a relationship with Mark than her own existence. I think Helena, truthfully, is jealous of Hallie's existence and how quickly she's connected with someone. And that's shown by that scene where Helena and Mark meet up, and it doesn't feel evil. It feels like she's genuinely trying to like build a relationship with Audi Mark. Super interesting. But getting back to the finale, we then get this incredible sequence where, also, I love the transition from Audi Mark or any Mark. I love the transition from any Mark being like, hey, the next time I wake up, I better be on the severed floor. Hard cut to severed floor. Perfect. So the finale gets moving and the plan starts, and I fucking, oh my God. The sequence of him finding the hallways, the sequence of them up above holding off Milchek in the bathroom, incredible. Just incredible stuff. I love Dylan's hero moment, iconic. But the sequence, just remarkable. I don't even need a gush. You all know how good it is. But the sequence of Mark finding Gemma, realizing who she is, she's not the Gemma he knows yet. He brings her out. They have an actual reunion, is fucking beautiful. It's just the best. it's so fucking good. It's just incredible. It is so good. It's so good. Anyways, I love the fight scene. I love the fight scene they have with Drummond, and I love this show's always had a very clinical like Apple product feel to it. I didn't think they would ever get that violent, but they get real violent with it. The way Mark's getting beat up, there was a genuine sense of danger, and I love the elevator shot. Probably my favorite moment of TV in genuinely like a long time. Like maybe I've never clapped. I've actually never been compelled to clap and go holy. Like I was full Marvel fanning when he was in the elevator and he laid out to Audi Mark, like, here's what we're going to do. Transition, shoots him. It was a great moment too, because I was scared he was going to pull his punches and Drummond was just going to overthrow him. Amazing moment. Amazing fucking moment. And you would do that too. You'd be like, oops, like, great. Anyways, I just thought it was perfect. And you know everything that happens, so what am I doing? But let's get to the ending. So Innie Mark gets Gemma out, which, by the way, might I add, is all that was asked of him. I'm not trying to be like super literal here, but they literally said like, oh, get Gemma out to the stairwell. That's it. They didn't say, then you go up the stairwell. I actually did kind of have a feeling that he was going to stay on that thing and then ride the elevator up. But no, I think they must have intended Mark to also go with him. That's the only way the ending works emotionally. But regardless, he did technically do what they said. But he gets Gemma out. Gemma seems confused as to why Mark's acting this way. But obviously we know it's because he's an innie. And I think it's a great fucking ending. I disagree with people that, one, think it's a bad ending, and two, are angry at innie Mark. I think that's audacious. And let me explain why I love the ending. It's not realistic that they're going to have an amazing love story together. I think any Mark knows this. I think Hallie knows this. I think they all know it, that this is naive and stupid. But similar to what I said before, the beautiful thing about any Mark and his love for Hallie is the fact that it's childlike, is the fact that it's unadulterated. It's not fucked up by the rest of the world and all its dumb, useless shit and all these stupid fights that Audi Mark has had with Gemma. He hasn't had those with Hallie. It's pure fucking vibes, And he looks at the door and he goes, "I've done my big thing." And before you come for any Mark has done the right thing at every turn. He yelled out about Gemma being alive, even though he isn't in love with Gemma. He yelled that out at the end of season 1 because he knows it's important. He knows that Audi Mark would want to know. That is thoughtful. Whereas at every turn, Audi Mark has been a bit of an asshole to Innie Mark, whereas Innie Mark has shown genuine thought, concern, and care for Audi Mark. Secondly, he risks his life, risks his entire Floor's existence to get Gemma out. Yes, they were probably going to be put down either way, but he goes for it. He gets Gemma out. That is a groundbreaking thing. That at the very least, I'm assuming Gemma actually gets out the stairwell. Like, that's a huge thing. They have evidence that Lumen has faked someone's death potentially and tortured them down below. She's going to have memories of what they've done to her. It's an amazing thing to do. So even if he gets 4 minutes, all right, 4 minutes just running down a hallway, similar to the ending of The Graduate, where it's like, fuck, what do we do now? Like, we just acted on impulse. I am okay with that. It's fucking beautiful. It's beautiful. It's the show operating at such a high level. It's all the science fiction concepts, all the Lumen stuff I found a bit overreaching, all the conflict between Audi and Innie, all of the character dynamics they've set up coming together in this incredible moment. I love the transition to film. I think it's incredible. I love it. It's a perfect ending. And you know what? I want season 3. I do want season 3. The show could flat out end here with this open ending, and we would discuss it for years. And yeah, we can all safely assume that the innies are fucked. They are fucked, all right? But there's something beautiful about them fighting for 5 more minutes. Even if season 3 opens with her pushing him into the elevator to go up the 7th floor and become Audi Mark, just the idea that they go 5 extra minutes is beautiful. It's a perfect ending to season 2. It brings home everything. It brings home the slight issues I had with the over importance of Lumen and it creates a deeply personal story between Audi Mark, Innie Mark, Gemma, and Hallie. Also, the people that have been perceiving this as a love triangle, what are you doing? Like, they're different people. That is the big thesis of season 2, is that the Audis and the Innies are different people. Even that conversation that Audi Dylan has with Innie Dylan about, "I respect you. I feel like Gemma sees something in you that she doesn't see in me anymore. I'm leaving the choice up to you." It's a beautiful moment. I teared up in that moment too. I fucking loved season 2, and the finale just knocked it out of the park. Loved it. So yeah, let's go character by character. I mentioned Audi Mark and Innie Mark to death. I mentioned the fact that I feel like Helena on the outside actually envies Hallie and kind of wants that. And that's kind of reincorporated and reaffirmed by the fact that James, that fucking creepy old dude, actually likes Hallie down below better as well. So that's kind of like a fact. Next, Dylan Innie versus Dylan Audi. Yeah, love that whole sequence where Audi Dylan threatens to quit, has that fight with Gemma where he's like, "I might just fucking quit," and then he doesn't exist. How would you fucking like that? And then cools off and writes that beautiful letter. Excellent stuff. Let's talk about Irving. Irving was the heart of the early episodes. I thought him realizing that Hallie wasn't the right Hallie, his passion, the way he was the biggest stickler for this company, really pays off here in a beautiful moment and a tragic ending. And I like that he actually dies. And I feel like the way he leaves the show is earned. It doesn't feel like I'm going back to my home planet now because they can't afford me. It feels like an appropriate end for the show. I liked his ending with Bert. I love the scene with Bert's partner, and Irving. Fucking weird, uncomfortable, great TV. Next, let's talk about Milchek. He's the one I haven't really talked about too much. I find Milchek and his arc this season incredible. First off, I'm not the first to point this out, but the way Lumen tries to control his language, control how he appears, how he presents himself, does feel like very like an allegory or just straight up racial microaggressions. It does. But I think more importantly, there's this sense that they want to limit his vernacular, limit his vocabulary because they don't want him to appear particularly smart. They don't want this evolved language to leak into the innies because they see the innies as different people. Also, hot theory, hot take, I've always thought that maybe Milchek is in a permanent state of severance. Hear me out on this one. The way he acts on the outside world and inside world, he feels like an innie. He's weird as fuck. He's kind of strange. He's obsessed with Lumen. I feel like there's a real version of Milchek that's signed up, and this is his severed self, both in the outworld and the in-world. Obviously a different chip or a different programming, but do you guys kind of get what I'm saying? Because there's no way someone's this weird that isn't like an actual Lumen prodigy. But yeah, I love the way he uses his language to get back at them. And yeah, simultaneously, I feel like these people see Milchek as less than just for the work he does, but also, yeah, there is probably a racial component. It is important to note that it seems like all these Lumen uppers, this Lumen family, are this like kind of this really off-kilter Aryan family that seem to want to spread this like perfect existence to everyone. And yeah, it seems like these innies, they are trained to see them as literal gods. But yeah, I love Milchek. I also find Milchek interesting because I feel like, yes, technically he's doing an awful thing by limiting the innies, but I think simultaneously he cares about the innies having a good time just on his terms, just in the sense of like it has to be in a way that works for Lumen and the company goals. But I do feel like Milchek, it's very strange because he is evil and is antagonistic and is an oppositional force to our core characters, but it seems like he does care about them having a good time. He seems genuinely butthurt that they start laughing at that story he was trying to tell. And it seems like he did want them to enjoy it the same way he wants to enjoy it. It's not like he sees what he gives the innies as below him. That was initially the read I had with Milchek, that he was patronizing them and treating them like babies, but I feel like he's actually into this stuff. Like, look at how he gets down in that orchestra sequence. He fucking loves it. He loves it, and he wants them to enjoy it as much as he does. And that is what makes me think maybe he's like severed overall, because it's like, who the fuck would enjoy this Lumen shit as much as he does? But yeah, really, really interesting stuff. Next, who else is there to talk about? I didn't really talk about Miss Cobell. I'm going to be real. Miss Cobell is weird, and not like weird in like a really good way. I don't really connect with her character. I find she's a bit plot devicey as well. Like, why is she helping them? Again, maybe that's the point we're meant to be like, oh, what's going on here? But I love the way she introduces herself to, is it Innie Mark? Yeah, Innie Mark when he comes into the room. It's like, she literally could not look more evil or menacing. But yeah, I've always found her a bit of a strange character. Sometimes I really love what they're doing with her, and sometimes I feel like, similar to that character that's helping Mark reintegrate, it feels a bit plot devicey and a bit contrived and just like, this is what we need her to do for the sake of the plot. Like, Devon calling her was a really fucking baffling choice, I thought. But then the show kind of writes in a way where it's like, no, this made sense. And I'm like, really? Because I didn't fucking get it. I thought she was actually flat out weird and evil and almost seemingly grooming Devon's baby to be like that was fucking weird, you know? But regardless, that's what we get. I fucking love this season. I absolutely adored this season of television. And even in its weakest moments, they're like strengthened by how well this season comes together. I just thought it was absolutely excellent. Regardless, if you enjoyed this video, please consider gaining a membership to this channel. As I mentioned before, please consider subscribing, liking, commenting.